talk about a few topics today, and one of the things we want to talk about is why a lot of men don't go to church. And I have a few ideas, but I'd like to ask you guys first, why do you think men don't come to church? What are some of the issues?
I have a lot of texts, I have a lot of things from friends who say, I would be there, but my team's playing today. They're playing this team. And I know it's something we got to get past, but it's just like that time Joe had that prayer thing. Remember the Super Bowl?
Yeah,
Super Bowl laying on that night.
It sure did.
And I forgot what he exactly said, but he asked a question. He said, "Is football really more important in that aspect than God?"
Wow.
And it kind of hit home for all of us. And even though we didn't go see Super Bowl, we didn't watch it.
True.
We were still at the prayer service, but we were kind of moping and everything. But it took that to kind of like put it in general.
But weren't people also cheating with their mobiles?
Yeah, people had their phones on.
Any scores?
No, it was like, oh, I got a text. But sports, football, things like that is what's hurting us. And I like the idea that we actually have these TVs and how we put the football game on here after service, and we actually get fellowship that way.
Well, I think that it's not really sports. In fact, I think that that's just the surface mask of what the real problem is. The fact of the matter is that more men don't come to church because there's a lack of identity. And I think that sports, just like a lot of other things, whether it be work or something like that, are just the things that they use as the crutch to really hide what's really going on inside of them. And the fact of the matter is that if men were more balanced in their understanding of who they were, they would be at church. They would prioritize things better, and there wouldn't be such a lack of manhood, if you will, in churches. If you look at most choirs today, they're mostly made up of women, things of that nature.
No, it's true.
Most men's ministries
Are men that look like women and act like them too?
Well,
yeah. There's just a blandness, and and it's interesting because one of the things that I notice in our church, when I look at the men in our church, is that they're real men. The ones that are here are very stable in that. They're humble, but they're all different. But they're solid guys, and they're people that you can look at and depend on. So I think that more men are not in church is simply because they're scared. They're women.
what happened to them? What got them to that point? I think that growing up without a paternal role model,
Right.
to really show them these things, to show them how to be a man, you know what I'm saying, and not just be some pansy, wimpy guy.
Right.
It's interesting that, this man is not that much older than I am, but yet he's a father to me. He's like my father, and I view him that way because he's a very balanced person. He has a job. Well, he had a job.
He has a job.
Well, he has a job, in the sense that, he's our pastor,
Yeah.
but he's a provider,
Right.
he's a husband, he's a friend, he's someone's son. You know what I'm saying? He's a very, the totality of his life is very balanced and complete and stable. And he's not flaky. I think that's a big part of why men don't come to church, because they don't really have that role model to say, okay, this is how it's done, son.
Yeah.
Don't you think the media plays a role? Look at how the guy that's very feminine, are effeminate.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't
Without
seem
a
like
doubt.
that's the role that people are pushing, that you need to be sensitive and you need to look like, $1 million. And then when you watch all the television shows, the only ones that are hip are those who are gay.
Yeah.
Remember, what's that show that they had, Straight Eye for I forget what it's
queer
called.
guy?
Yeah, and notice here men are getting advice from gay men how to be a man.
Right.
So I think there's an oxymoron about that.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because even as far back as, like, for example, the Cosby Show, and what's that one about the guy who's supposed to be a delivery guy? I can't stand that show because of that.
You're talking about the one where they're in New York.
Yeah.
The New York.
All of these men are portrayed to be subservient to their wives in intellect and things of that nature. They literally.
Oh, Married with Children.
That's another one.
No, King's Queens.
King of Queens. Yeah, that's it. All of these
Everybody
men
loves
are
Reagan.
being portrayed as these men who are idiots, if you will,
Absolutely.
and don't have the character to really be leaders of their household. So they're just totally mistake prone or something else that in fact demeans manhood. And as a result of that, women have to take the leadership role and have to come in and clean up the messes that these men are making in that. And I think that, and I don't know how many men, I personally don't watch those shows, who watch those things and subliminally are getting the message, well, I guess that's what men are like.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
what I was going to
ridiculous.
say. Society has created this image of manhood, like these, where these TV shows come from. Well, there's something behind that. But that's not. Also, the issue is the church issue. What have our churches taught us about manhood?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And it talks about in Ephesians 5 that talks about marriage, but relates it to Christ and the church. And we have missed that. I mean, I can't remember what last time I've been taught that in a church. But when you get men together in a church environment, and this happened where we used to all go. Remember, the men's meeting used to be really popular when we talked about spiritual issues and what it meant to be a man in God's eyes, and were able to participate in ministering to one another.
Right.
That brought out the manhood in men, because we want to be active. The other issue was that entertainment issue, sports and all that. Somehow men have gotten this impression that, well, I worked hard, I deserve the time off, from work. But entertainment has become such a huge part of our society. The money that's spent not only on sports, but all kinds of entertainment, so outweighs the amount of money being put into ministry or into churches that it's pathetic. But that has to change, and through right teaching and right mentoring. Right. Those of us that attend church regularly and are trying to live righteous lives and spiritually be alert to spiritual matters. We have to draw the men into other men into that same environment, because unless we separate, first of all, in our thinking from the natural, and you talked about it, the carnal reasoning, the carnal mindedness, and take on the spiritual mind, we're not going to see anything change in our lives. Look at the number of families. What is it? Approaching 50% are fatherless. Yeah. What has happened to those men that that just can walk away from a family? I can't get into that. I can't get into that perspective. It's just not there.
Well, and I also have something that's going to stir up the hornet's nest. They did Islam has been just rising as far as memberships, and in fact, when you go to Europe, you'll see Christian churches that are old closing, and mosques are rising up within them. 20 years ago, they already saw this trend, and they begin to ask why so many African American men were becoming Muslim. They were asking them. They did this poll, and the number one response why young Black African American men were just invading the church, if you will. I'm talking about the Islamic faith religion.
Joe. Yeah, it's nice, huh?